Hello and welcome everyone to our Laserfiche webinar for this Thursday, May 9th. We're going to take a look at Laserfiche troubleshooting tips. Our topic here today is called Mayday, Mayday. We have an emergency. What to do in Laserfiche. I should preface this with the fact that this relates to on-premise systems, not Laserfiche Cloud. Laserfiche Cloud is all supported by Laserfiche themselves, although any support issues you might have are routed through your VAR. If you're not a client of CDI, that's okay. Your VAR should be able to support you on that cloud system through Laserfiche. But if you have a Laserfiche system on-premise, this class is for you. All right, so we have various ways to troubleshoot Laserfiche, but before we get to that, let me introduce myself. My name is Kyle Niebel. I'm the technical trainer here, or one of the technical trainers here at Cities Digital, and it's my pleasure to have you all here today. The webinar is going to be recorded. We'll get that up in just a matter of hours, maybe within the next day or two. And during this session, if you have questions, please refer to the questions box or the chat window in your webinar presentation screen and post any questions there so that we can answer them as we go along. Love getting questions from you as we go along. So today's webinar, topics to cover include, how do we confirm that the Laserfiche server is up and running? If that server system is not up and running, that service will not allow us to log into the repository and do our work. Secondarily, you could have the Laserfiche server service running, but the database is down. And we'll talk about how to talk to the SQL database and see how it's doing. Thirdly, we're going to look and see how can we confirm that the web client or the desktop client are connecting to the Laserfiche server and see that all is well in the world. Fourthly, we'll confirm if the network is up. Sometimes all the components are running. However, there's just no communication between the client and the server. And sometimes we just need to be able to see if can we talk to that server over the network. And finally, we might run into situations where an application is being prevented from running because an antivirus application has decided that it's a bad actor and doesn't want to let it run. So we'll talk about some techniques and things to look for in that regard. All right, a little bit more specifics for each topic. When it comes to the Laserfiche server, how do we know that the server service is running? Well, that's an administrative task. Laserfiche admins typically will be able to access the Laserfiche server upon which the Laserfiche server service is running. And there's many Windows server services running on a Windows server. Laserfiche could be just one of many. In the screenshot here, you can see that there is a Laserfiche server listed here. As you can see, quite a few other Laserfiche components may run on that same server. This is an example system. Yours may look different, but there are all these services running in the background on that server that are taking care of things. And namely, for repository access, you need the Laserfiche server service, and that should be in the running state. If it's not running, you're not going to be able to log into the repository. Now, you can just start it up. In fact, we'll talk about how we do that in a minute. All right, so that's that. For the database, even if the server service for Laserfiche is running, there is a Microsoft SQL database typically in the background that is storing all the information about documents and managing the system altogether. Now, behind the scenes, that database is supporting all the things that you might do in the repository or through the Laserfiche administration console. So this is a very crucial component of the Laserfiche system, as is the server service, or in other words, the Laserfiche server service, okay? So what tools do we use? Well, typically we'll use Microsoft Services Console, just like we saw previously in that example. That's where we can find the SQL tools and the Laserfiche administration console as well. All right. So as we saw, the services, which is a Windows tool, the services console, or if you run services.msc from a command line, you can get to this application. It's also found, and I'll show you in a moment where this is. On that server, you can run it from that machine to see what is running. In this case, I'm highlighting the SQL server that's running. This happens to be, if you're into Microsoft SQL, anything in a parentheses, like we see here, SQL Server, and then parentheses SQL Express. That is a free version of Laserfiche SQL Server, not Laserfiche, but Microsoft SQL Server. Whereas if you had a full SQL Server installed, there would be no parentheses around it, just say SQL Server, which supports a lot more databases and a lot more data than a free version like we see here, the Express Edition as they call it. On the right-hand side is our administration console, and within the repository options settings subnode, as you see down there on the bottom right, that information tells us what that service should be, what server it's on, and things like that. So we can go over to that server if we have to. And many times that server is a different server than the Laserfiche server. We can see where it is connected to, and we can then go look at that information on that server. Okay, so some basic information there. All right, again, all these topics and these intros will come and we'll take a look at them one by one in a live environment here on this system. And many times we're sitting at the desktop or our web client and we're trying to connect. Sometimes you'll get an error message, and there's a couple ways to just confirm that these clients are able to connect. Usually they should just find the repository, which is advertising itself on the network. So Laserfiche, that service is advertising any repository that's available. It's broadcasting it across your network, and you should be able to see it in your client, regardless of whether it's your web client or Windows desktop client. All right. Sometimes it won't connect, and you'll get an error message, 9008 or some other numbered messages, which you can reach out to our support desk if you are having trouble. But to troubleshoot before you do that, sometimes you just might want to do this yourself. And you can do this on any machine. The typical way to just make sure that you have connectivity is you can launch what Windows has is a command prompt. It's an old school, old DOS window, if you will, unlike Windows back in the day. So you can do this, and you can ping. Yeah, it kind of says, hey, are you out there? And you can ping the Laserfiche server by name or even by its IP address. IP being Internet Protocol. Every server has a numbered address, just like your home has a number address. Well, servers actually have a numbered address as well, and you can ping it either by its name or its IP address. We'll talk about that in a minute. On the desktop client, if you don't see, normally you'll see a repository listed, right? So you can kind of see that that's there. However, in the image that we see on the right-hand side, if you don't see any repositories listed that normally would be advertised, that's not necessarily bad, typically, unless everything's off. But what you should be able to do is actually, down at the bottom, there's an attach button, which then launches what we can see here on that right side image, the attach box, where you can type in the name of the server or the IP address of the server. It doesn't matter. I've typed in, as you can see here, the address here is listed as localhost. Okay, that might be for this system because it actually is on the local machine. If it's on any other machine, you're out on your workstation in the office, that address should be the Laserfiche server name. And that might be laserficheserver.mynetwork.local. Sometimes you have to type in that full long name, what they call the fully qualified domain name, or FQDN. That whole address, sometimes you have to type that in. Sometimes you just have to type in the name of the server and nothing else, right? Just Laserfiche server, all one word or whatever it may be in your environment. If you're not sure what it is, go ahead and ask your administrator of Laserfiche if they should know this, so not a big deal. IT will definitely know this as well. And then once you've typed in the address, you should be able to hit the drop down in the repository list and see any available repositories, which then will attach it and make it available every time you launch the client from then on. Okay, so pretty easy to figure out do we have connectivity? Again, many times, just being able to ping the server should tell you that the network is up. There's no firewall issues. Because yes, in many cases, that Laserfiche server might be sitting behind a secure firewall and only allows traffic from your computer into the server. And sometimes that firewall might get misconfigured. It might be off and not letting anybody in. Who knows? And therefore, IT will sometimes have to be rounded up. But again, just using this command prompt and pinging the server name or address is a nice tool to tell you if the network is actually up and running, or at least from your workstation, can you do anything? You can ping items out in the internet. So you could ping google.com, kind of a fun trick. Go ahead and type ping space google or www.google.com. You'll get a response. It's kind of fun. I'll show you that in a minute or two here as well. And finally, we might want to confirm if AntiVirus is preventing connections. Now, your clients, whether it be Windows or web client, they usually won't have an issue because they are using port 80 on the network, which is kind of like a web browser. In fact, even the Windows client's using a web browser communication method. So it really should connect no problem. The issue we normally see is when you're using scanning, like with a desktop scanner, the desktop scanning applications, or quick fields, or some other applications that are installed in the C program files, Laserfiche directories. And there's two. There's the program files x86 and the regular program files paths. And sometimes the antivirus will read that executable that's running, that .exe file, and potentially not allow it to do things because it doesn't like that file. Now, those are older applications. These days, and when I say applications, I mean antivirus applications. These days, there are many applications that are based on behavior and heuristics, which really don't necessarily look at executables, but just looking at the behavior of the application software so that it doesn't become an issue. And you really don't have any troublesome problems in that case anyway. So antivirus is not a big deal, but what you could do is at the client side, if you are finding that there's an issue or you think there's an issue, you can disable, sometimes with the assistance of your IT staff, you can disable the antivirus software temporarily and then test that application again. If it still doesn't run, then that's not an antivirus, obviously, but if it ran perfectly this time, well, then you could either put in exceptions or what they call whitelisting. And you can whitelist a path like we see here, C program files Laserfiche or C program files x86 Laserfiche, and even the common files pathing as well. So that can tell the antivirus software, hey, ignore any issues with these files. They're okay. We're fine with that. So as opposed to blacklisting, which says, no, you can't do this ever. But whitelisting is really allowing for exceptions. Okay, pretty cool. So let's take a look at that. Now, after this session, if you're more interested in learning a bit more about items, Laserfiche has quite a few resources. The two best ones I can tell you is their answers forum, which is at https://answers.laserfiche.com. That does require a free Laserfiche support site account, and you can sign up on the Laserfiche answers forum or the support site itself, which you see listed below at laserfiche.com/support. Just make sure that you have your company name as it's listed in the application or on the server. I'll show you that in a moment, as well as the serial number as well. So that is the way we do things. All right, so let's cover our first topic here and talk about when it comes to seeing if the Laserfiche server is up and running. And typically what I'll do is I'll launch the from the menu on my server. I'll type in services, and that should launch an application that looks like this. It's just a little console, And it has a lot of services on here. But if you just click in here anywhere and type L, this will take you down to the, alphabetically speaking, Laserfiche services on that server. And in our case, we have a server listed here, and it is running. As you can see, you can stop that service. You can even restart it if you have issues. Maybe somebody reports a weird problem and nobody can log in. You might find that it actually has stopped, or it never restarted upon a server reboot. This is really common on Mondays. So on Monday morning, you come in, try and log in to Laserfiche, and you can't do anything, or your workflows aren't working. So one of those services might not have started after a server reboot over the weekend, which is, a fairly benign issue. You're not going to lose anything, but there is that service that should be up and running, and it has properties. In many cases, the service is running, and it might need to use a special account. And in many cases, when the SQL server, which we'll talk about in a moment, that database server, if it's on a different machine, this account needs to run a Windows account that can log into that SQL server in order to talk between the two. All right, so that's typical. You might find that. And if that account, for some reason, we try and guide our clients so that the password is set and never changes for this service account. It is a Windows account, but it's more like it's never used by a person. It's actually for a machine to use. And that password should really not change. If somebody goes in and does change it, well, then we're going to have some issues with that service not being able to start. So that is what we might use to troubleshoot if that service is not running and you can't get it to start up, because sometimes you'll come in here and you'll say, yeah, it's stopped, right? It's not running. And it just says blank. It's not running. Its start type is automatic, and yet it's not running. Well, it should have started, but it didn't. Go ahead and right click, and the IT folks will hit start, and then they'll get a message saying couldn't start, log in, or some other spurious message, and it won't ever start up. So that's when you start thinking, I wonder if that account name has changed. As you can see on my system here, the local system account is running. And if everything's on one server, that's okay. But when you have components of the system spread across multiple different servers on the network, we do want to make sure that we are using a special network-based or Windows account that's specifically for Laserfiche. You might see something like within your Windows network, a Laserfiche account or Laserfiche services account or whatever it may be. That's pretty typical. And we want to make sure that that is up and running. Most of the time, it's just a server was rebooted over the weekend, the service tried to restart but didn't for some reason, and you just come in here, manually start it, and you're good to go. Okay, so that is how do you know the server's up. Of course, how do you know the server's up and running? Well, you can also launch your Laserfiche administration console, and if it's not running, you won't see any repositories. So that's always interesting. Now, remember I mentioned just a moment ago about getting a Laserfiche support site account. If you happen to have access to the administration console, you can find your information here on the server name listing under the admin console, and then the first level down under that server name, which will be different than what you see on screen. It will be some special name. Usually a lot of people put the word Laserfiche in there, but it could be a variation on that theme. And you'll find your company name listed there, and ignore that serial number. You won't be able to use it anyway. And that'll be your serial number. Don't use this one. Use your own serial number information, okay? And you'll see a repository, and you'll be able to connect to it and log in. And if you can't log into it, then, and everybody else is screaming, hey, we can't log into the Laserfiche client, that's what's going on. It's just not, that service potentially is not started. Now, what if it is started, right? Okay. The service is started, but everybody's getting error messages when they launch their desktop client or their Windows client to log in. They're getting a 9,000 something error. A lot of times those 9,000 errors means, yeah, the service is running, but I can't get to the database to show you the content that's in that database. So a lot of times what we'll do is we'll come back to this service account area, the services console, if you will, and we will go down to the SQL listing. Yes, there is a SQL, or people pronounce it SQL, but it's really just an acronym, SQL, Structured Query Language, for those who are curious. And you'll find that there is a SQL Server instance somewhere running, either in parentheses or just full SQL Server. Sometimes it says MS SQL, and so it might be listed under M for Microsoft, but the newer versions usually show up under S as in Sam for SQL Server. If that's stopped, well then go ahead and make sure that that has started as well. It could be that the SQL Server itself is on a different machine and that machine is off. IT will know this pretty quickly as soon as you tell them, hey, looks like I can get to this, admin console, but I don't see anything. It'll kind of clue you in, and then the database guys will then go, oh, our server's down. So once they get that up and running, everything should start working. You don't have to typically, once you start the SQL Server, the Laserfiche server will reconnect to it, and then your client-side applications like the web client or the desktop client will log in. Okay. All right. So if the server is up for Laserfiche, the database is up and running, but you can't log in. You're trying to launch your client and get signed in, and it won't let you sign in. I'm going to double click on my Laserfiche login here. And what if you don't see a repository? Well, that should, and it used to be there. What if the repository was there yesterday, but now you come in the morning and the repository is not listed? You could try and attach, do the other things like pinging it. If you can ping the server, then that's good. Like you said, like we saw, so using that command line. Oh, by the way, how do we launch that command line? Let me go ahead and show you that. I can't show it because I'm sharing one side of my screen and I've got another one, but I'll go ahead and launch that command prompt, and we'll bring that over to the screen here. And it'll always show users / and your name when you launch that command prompt, CMD, right? In the bottom right corner of your taskbar where it says type here to search, you can type in CMD and you'll get a listing for the command prompt or this, what you see here. Just double click on it or click on that icon and it will launch this screen that you see here. It's pretty fun. And you can do a lot of things in here. One of them is to figure out, hey, is there anything out there on the network? It's kind of like, hey, can I talk to you? So if we type in the word ping, it does not have to be, it's not case sensitive. Just the word ping is important to know. Put a space and then type in whatever you're looking for to see if it'll respond. I said you could ping internet sites. You can do that and see how it returned a number, that 142.50.190.4. That's an IP address. And that's a public IP address on the internet. Every server out there in the world has one of these. And internally, servers have them as well. If I ping myself, we ping this internal server right here on this machine, it should reply, and it's kind of saying, yes, I'm here, .1. You could also ping another IP address, but as you can see, it says, yep, it's sent for, received for, nothing lost, meaning we're all good, okay? If you see a message that says, I sent for and received nothing, then that means nothing's transmitting over the wire from your machine to wherever you're trying to get to. So we're not sure where it might be that it's having a problem. It could be that your ping gets to the firewall and then nothing goes out past that. Or a server could be down. You could have a router that's down, could have wiring that got eaten by a rodent overnight, and now the communication from your machine to that server is down. Kind of a typical way to troubleshoot things. So we can say, hey, anybody out there? And if you get a response, you're good. Okay, so this is a typical way to troubleshoot things if you're curious to do that. So the command prompt and then typing in the ping command is a great tool to troubleshoot network issues as well. So you could type in the server name, whatever it might be, and should be good. And remember, it might not just be just the server name itself. It might be ping and then server name dot domain dot com, could be dot local. That's a fairly typical construct in the world, but you'll have to ask your IT what their domain setup is and how you might ping the server with its fully qualified domain name. Every server exists on a network domain, if you will, and that comes from the domain name server service. So there's a server on your network that allows it to translate server names into IP addresses. It's kind of like the post office knows that you, Joe, live at 856 Main Street, and 856 Main Street has Joe, Jill, and John living there. There's a machine on the network that's also doing all this about the servers, and it knows that server 1 has that address, and that address maps to server 1, and that way it can route all the traffic. It's amazing, but true, just a lot more complex, and it runs fast, and you don't even know it's really happening. So that domain is where your network lives, so to speak. So all the servers should be on there, and you can ping it by IP address or server name, and that's why ping actually works. Okay, so a little deep dive in networking there. That's part of my background way back in the day, but if you have any questions, please let me know. And again, the question box is available or the chat window, so we can talk about that if you have any questions on there. All right, and then next and final topic is antivirus. So on your machine, you might have a on-demand, real-time antivirus system. You might have a older antivirus system that maybe Trend Micro's older versions, version 6 or below, or something like that, that has been installed and analyzes activity on your machine. Usually it's analyzing those executables. Are you running an application, and does that application warrant further analysis, or does that antivirus software stop it from running because it's on a list that says, oh, I don't know that application, I'm not going to let it run. So sometimes you'll have an issue with that antivirus, and it'll stop things, but you won't really be able to tell. You might just log into Laserfiche, right? And then you'll start scanning. And now scanning, which worked yesterday, doesn't work today. Well, what that would cause that? Did we have a corruption of the application software? Did my server, or no, did your workstation, what I meant to say, did your workstation get rebooted in the middle of doing something and you had a crash? Who knows? These days, workstations are fairly reliable. Crashes of our workstations aren't that common, especially if you have modern equipment, all right? So what do we do to troubleshoot antivirus? As I mentioned in the slide, what we'll typically do is we'll disable that application on there. And I can't really show it on this screen because I am not mirroring my taskbar, but usually over in the bottom right corner of your Windows taskbar, you'll find a little upward pointing caret symbol or icon. And that will show you the antivirus application icon in that list of running task icons, all right? And you can right-click on them sometimes and disable it. Now, you might try and disable it. It might look like you can. So a little sidebar here. If you try and disable it and it says your administrator needs to do this, well, that's when you call the IT staff and say, hey, I need to disable AV. I think my Laserfiche application is being blocked by the antivirus software. Can we test this? And they'll come out and sit down and either do it remotely or physically disable that on your behalf. And you can test the application again. If it runs, then it probably was that antivirus. And older systems may do this. The newer versions are, again, like I mentioned, behavior-based. They're very lightweight. They don't cause any slowdowns in application performance. They're just much better. So you might have heard of Sophos or ESET or CrowdStrike, any number of these antivirus endpoint systems, you'll be happily aware that there's more functionality in these systems with less intrusion in your daily work than there used to be in the past. So applications for antivirus these days are wonderful tools. Okay, so don't panic when you have a Mayday. The operator is there. Laserfiche is a very easy system to troubleshoot, and here at CDI, we have a number of very skilled support desk technicians waiting for you to call in, and if we have any, if you have any issues, we can help resolve them. But this class and webinar was really designed to help you go a little bit further and see how you can do some work yourself if you're interested in learning about troubleshooting Laserfiche. If you're a Laserfiche admin, this should have hopefully introduced you to the concepts of troubleshooting there in the Laserfiche system as well. So don't panic. You'll be able to fix this in no time, and your downtime will be very minimal, especially using these techniques. All right, so I haven't seen any questions. Either I'm explaining everything really well, or we happen to have a great staff here that we all already know everything that I've covered here. But I do appreciate any questions from the audience that you might have here. So we'll go ahead and wrap this up and allow any questions from the audience at the same time here. So we'll go ahead and do that. All right, and in conclusion, if you want to reach out and contact us, our support email is support@citiesdigital.com. If you need additional applications or seat licenses, our sales desk can help you at sales@citiesdigital.com. And if you have training classes or work that you want to do or have us do for you, consulting@citiesdigital.com is available to you as well. I do want to thank you again from all of us here at Cities Digital on our webinar, and look forward to seeing you at the next one. Awesome, we have a question here. Is there an order to restarting the servers if you have different servers? Great question. Okay, I would say if there is a order, I would start the SQL server first, then the Laserfiche server second, or the Laserfiche LFDS. If you have a Laserfiche directory server on a different server, that service could be started at any time. It really doesn't need the Laserfiche server to be running because it's authenticating users on that in that case. And then finally, the and your file server should be up and running as well before you launch the Laserfiche server after having launched the SQL server. So SQL server, Laserfiche server, web server, LFDS. How about that? So glad to help out. So if you have any other questions, I look forward to answering those. Feel free to email me. I don't have my email up here, but if you have any questions on today's training in our webinar, you can reach out to Kyle, K-Y-L-E, @citiesdigital.com. That's it for today. So if that was all you wanted to learn, great. If you want to learn some more about this, feel free to do that. But yeah, that's all for today. Thanks everyone for attending.